Well, it's great to have you both here. During this session, we are going to see the network of the National Library of Medicine system. It's a showcase, and so we'll be looking at how our team at Square used Drupal and CiviCRM to transition them from some other tools. They were already in Drupal, but to meet their needs. So I'm Jenna Dillette. I'm with Square. You can visit us there. The thing I always say about myself is I like people and I happen to work with software. And that feels very true, that I'm motivated by the people first, and then the fact that we can build all these really cool things is fun, because often in building out projects, it's so much more about how to navigate relationships and ask good questions, and then it's about the technical piece. And so about who we are at Square. We've been working in Drupal since 2008. We work predominantly with nonprofits and membership associations. About 10 years ago, we started providing ongoing hosting and maintenance. And so we've got a deep DevOps skill set as well as development skill set. And over the last several years, we've taken on some other software as well. But still, our core services that we provide are in Drupal CiviCRM systems. And I'll talk a little bit more about CiviCRM in a bit, since it's a big part of an NLM system. So the Network of the National Library of Medicine, their mission is to advance the progress of medicine and improve the public health by providing all U.S. health professionals with equal access to biomedical information and improving the public's access to information. So you can visit them in nlm.gov. I'll be walking through a bunch of screens in their system as we go through to see what it was that we built out and how they use it today for all kinds of management of information. So the overview of the project and the work that I'll be demonstrating is some work that we did at Square with NLM to replace Red Hen CRM, which they were using for their contact management needs. Was part of Drupal, with CiviCRM. And the purpose of that was to consolidate professional affiliation, so relationships between, say, an individual and their employer, so their institution, the geographic and demographic information that they were tracking for reporting purposes to think about reach and impact, their membership management, their directory, the impact that those members were having, event management, so thinking about trainings, on-demand resources, and finally grant management, since NLM makes a lot of grants possible, a lot of funding possible across the United States. So from a project goal perspective, our team wanted to minimize customizations as much as possible, which is a really great thing about Drupal and CiviCRM, that there's so much that comes out of the box when you install Drupal, as well as so much that you can do when you install additional modules. And the same thing is true with Civi, which I'll talk about. And so we wanted to leverage what we could. The reason for that is because we wanted to minimize headaches of maintenance down the road. As an agency doing the hosting and maintenance for the majority of our clients, then we know that if we build something super cool and custom, but then it comes to upgrade time and it gets really hard and expensive, well, that doesn't serve anybody any good. And so especially with NLM, since they have an in-house tech support team within the university, then we knew that it was important that we minimize customizations as much as we can to just have ongoing scalability and performance, and make that long-term maintenance just that much easier. And also choosing the platforms that they did because of the kind of control that they can have related to data ownership and the way that they can make changes. I always talk about how Drupal is a pile of Legos. You can build it this way, you can take it apart, build it another way. And so the way that they can add additional functionality in the future when strategies change and new programs get incorporated into work. So let's look at an overview of the specific tools that we used. Like I've already said, it was Drupal CiviCRM, and so those are links. The main modules in Drupal that we used was WebForm extensively. I love Drupal WebForm. And because CiviCRM is part of this project, then there's another fantastic module that's called WebForm CiviCRM, and it allows you to build a web form, but use CiviCRM contact data fields. And so your web form building experience is exactly what you would expect when building another web form, except that the fields that you're using are automatically updating the contact management system. And so that deep integration between two software, where even though they're separate, distinct, they live together hand in glove. The other thing that we used heavily is Drupal views. And then the module that we used with Drupal views is called CiviCRM Entity. And again, that allows us to basically take all that contact data, so individuals, organizations, take all that contact data, but do site building and configuration as if it's content. And so that really opens the doors as far as how information can be kept up to date on Drupal to the visitor, to a website visitor who's coming to the site, but doing so in a way that doesn't have to be manually managed as content in the system because it's pulling from that contact data that all lives in CiviCRM. So briefly, we're at DrupalCamp. What is CiviCRM since we are at DrupalCamp? So CiviCRM is an open source constituent relationship management CRM system. It's specifically targeted for nonprofits, membership associations, educational organizations, governments use it, and it must live with a CMS. And it can live with Drupal, WordPress, Joomla, or Backdrop. It has the tightest integration with Drupal as far as you can kind of do the most. For a complex system with more complex needs, it's often that if they're using CiviCRM, it makes sense to use it with Drupal. And noting that it's over 50% of the CiviCRM instances that exist live with Drupal. And so I think about CiviCRM as a CRM platform that from an individual feature perspective, it's good, but the thing that makes it great is that it can do so much. So there's CRM systems that are just about membership management, or software that's really about event management or about donor management. And when there's more, those specific softwares can have more robust features than what CiviCRM may have related to membership management or contribution management. The thing that makes it powerful is that it can do all of those things, maybe not as fancy as some of the standalone platforms, but when it can do all of that and it can live so tightly hand in glove with Drupal, then that configuration and site building potential is significant to have all of your data within one place. And so for an LM, the way that they use CiviCRM is for all of their contact management needs. So thinking about, again, those relationships between you have an individual who is an employee of an institute or a library or a public health department. So you have that individual, you have that public health department, library, whatever that organization may be. So the relationships between them. Also membership management. So typically for an LM or a lot of kind of more association-like organizations, it is an institute or an organization that holds the membership, and you as an employee of or volunteer of or whatever that relationship is, you inherit that membership because you have a relationship with the organization. And when you log into systems, you can do different things because you are a member. And so especially with Drupal, when we think about all the robust permission controls that we can have, then that inheritance of a membership all of a sudden becomes really powerful to open up doors of what someone can see and do when they're within the system. They also use CiviCRM for all of their event management, so event promotion, event registration, communications related to events, and then more broadly, just communications in general, so bulk mailings. And the final piece is grant management. And grant management is going to be a significant piece of what we talk about today. So, grant management, look at that. Let's look at strategic site building and what I mean by that. And so I'm going to share my screen of kind of a dev version of an LM system to walk you through their process and what was set up for how they can create requests for proposals, what that looks like for individuals and organizations when they apply, then how the NNLM team manages those applications, as well as how grantees, after they've been approved and their project is funded, how they go into the system and submit reports. And so I'm going to switch tabs and assume that my screen is still being shared to this one. Okay, let's make this big. And let's make it bigger. Okay. So this is Drupal. If you're familiar with Drupal, this is creating a node in Drupal. And so this content type is Drupal. In Drupal is called request for applications. And as you know, with content types, you can have all different kinds of fields. Those fields can be required. They can be of different type, a text area, a select. And so when an NNLM staff member is going in to add a new request for applications within the system, there's a lot of information that they can add about that. The funding period, you see that the majority of these fields are not required. Descriptions of funding information, summary, some information is auto-populated. Purpose, requirements, lots and lots and lots of fields. The way this looks on the front end then is we have all these funding opportunities. So on their website, this is just a view of that content that is set up. We can see what that award is, if there's an amount that's listed, what the description is, who it's open to. Region is a really important thing to NNLM, meaning that depending on what region I'm in, then there can be funding opportunities that are specifically shown to me because I see that in my profile when I'm authenticated in the system. We could look at one of these specific RFAs and we see the description again. This is that node display of what that content type is. And key thing here is that we see an ability to apply for this grant. So if I look at that, that is a web form. And because I'm logged into the system, it knows that it's me. And so it's auto-filling some information. And a really cool thing that is happening is that if we go back to the creation of this node, then there is this award category and the application type. And so for an NNLM staff member, when they set up a new RFA in the system, then this is a required field. They have to select what kind of application it is. There's a little bit of work that was done by the developer in the back end that based on that, then when me as an applicant goes in to apply for this, I am redirected to one of 3 web forms. And that happens automatically. So then it will autofill information that is pulled in from that request for application. So let's look at the anatomy of this web form a little bit. If you look at this web form, which is the grant application for that RFA that we were just on, because I want to apply and I want to be funded, this is a web form. You can see the key though, you see all these CiviCRM fields because those are pulling in directly from the CiviCRM system that lives hand in glove with the Drupal system that they have. I have another tab open because I was, it's always good to be a little paranoid about internet connections. So I have all my tabs open. So we see this is, we were just on the build page. Now we're on the CiviCRM tab where you can see that when I set up this web form, I am going to select the fields from the CiviCRM system that I want to have displayed. So you can see that first name, last name, existing contact, that exactly matches this. You can see that I could have a lot of other fields as well. And I'm also determining in this configuration of the web form how many contacts I want to enable for CiviCRM processing, meaning how many contacts are going to either be created or updated upon the submission of this form. And so what that will do is automatically create those relationships, say the employee of, employer of relationship that needs to exist between 2 contacts. And most importantly, it will automatically, upon submission, create a grant within CiviCRM. And that grant, which is using the CiviCase component, but you can do word replacement and have case be called whatever you want in the system. So that grant will then automatically have a status of submitted for review. And so the NNLM staff and all the regions that work can know, okay, the case is in this status, obviously need to be reviewed because that's the status that they're in versus those that have been, we could see the settings that have been rejected or awarded or in progress. But the important thing being that since this is the grant application, that needs to be submitted for review. We also see what kind of type it is, that this is for professional development for individuals that is different than professional development for, say, an NNLM member. So again, a institution versus an individual. And the way that relationships and responsibilities differ depending on who is kind of the grantee in a situation. And then we have a bunch of fields. So common fields, which means that fields that are relevant no matter what type of grant type it is, whether it's for individuals or for organizations. and then specific fields that are about professional development. You see that there's a lot of other fields that could be made available, but those are for internal purposes. And so they're not enabled on this grant because this is really for an NLM to fill out. Once they decide that they want to approve an opportunity, then they can go into the back end and add in what the funding actually needs to be. So the other thing I wanted to point out about this cool web form, because web forms are so cool, and then when you add in CiviCRM, it gets even cooler as far as the potential, is a unique email handler that our team set up, because there's all these regions, and upon submission of a grant, you don't want to notify everybody in the country because it's only region 6 that needs to review these applications. And so that was an important thing related to communication, that we could have one central web form, or really 3, but 3 central web forms that are the grant application that is coming off of a node that is the RFA itself, and then notify the specific person. So there's different pieces of data that we are pulling through from this original RFA, this original thing in Drupal, and it's really about the funding source. This is a field from the node that we are pulling through the web form, that then also lives in CiviCRM, that then can allow us to say it is, region 6 that should get it instead of region 5. And so even though we have all the different email addresses enabled in this handler, it's pulling that information to only notify the people that should actually be notified. On the CiviCRM side, this is what that dashboard can then look like, and this would look a little different for any specific person who would log in. They would see the grants that they are part of that are in progress, and also what those statuses are, and then they can click in order to manage that. And so if we just look at just a demo one that was set up, then you can see that I could go in, if I'm managing this grant, I can update the status, do other things directly from within CiviCRM. For the member, the thing that's powerful is that in an LM, they want to share the good work of what they're doing with this network. They want to promote all the different things that these members are doing in the community, and also the funding that NNLM is making available. What kind of impact is that funding having? And so from the website, anybody can go to the website, they can view the member directory, they can click in to these members, and they can see a bunch of things about those members. And so if we just click into the Be More Like Claire, we can see lots of information about who main contacts are, which, this is a staging site, so got some duplicate stuff happening, but that's what happens with staging sites. But where they are, website to learn more, all of this data is coming from CiviCRM, but using the CiviCRM entity module and building Drupal views, we can stack these views and display information that then is automatically kept up to date when contacts change. At the same time, we can also see the kinds of projects that this organization is part of. And so if we look at this is a funded project. I can tell that from the URL. This is a funded project that this organization was part of. And we see all these details about who the awardee is, the demographics that this project is serving, the award details, project funding, that amount, and all of that information being public. Anything reporting in reports, that's because I'm logged in and I can see that as an admin. The power of that is that, again, having all of this data display in Drupal exactly how they want it to, because this is site building, but having all that data actually live within CiviCRM means that it can be kept up to date. And it also provides the grantee one place where they can go and submit their activity reports and their information. So again, having a centralized system, and there doesn't have to be data connections between all these external systems. And so for, if I'm that grantee, then I just log in, I see the activity reports that I need to follow up on, and now I'm going to submit a subaward activity report. We see, drum roll, it's a web form. So just another really great use of web forms. And again, because it knows who I am in the system, since I'm logged in, it's automatically populating some information. And I can order the fields in the way that I want to have them display. I can add help text. I can make them required. I can have conditional logic or validation rules, all the things that you can do with web forms. If we look at the anatomy of that grant activity report, We see this time there's up to 5 contacts that are being added or updated upon submission of this. And we also see that there is an activity that is being logged against a case. And so organizations will use CiviCase. In this case, they're using it for grant management. It could also be used for more traditional case management of working with an individual or working with an organization to process them through a variety of steps that have a sequential order and maybe a certain amount of duration between each of those steps as a status changes. And so it's a really flexible framework that then can be configured to meet a variety of needs. So in this case, we are logging an activity on a case, and we have a bunch of fields selected for what those reporting fields are, as well as some that aren't, because reporting needs change, versus staff fields and things that would happen in the back end that their team would need to add information about. So because we have all this information living in CiviCRM, that becomes really powerful for NNLM staff to be able to do reporting. So if we think from an advanced search within CiviCRM, this is just I think of this as the bathtub of every single piece of data that you have in your system. You can use it as filters of everybody who lives in Tennessee and went to an event last month and also likes yellow. Find all those people within one search. And so in a similar way, we could filter by a submission of an activity type, which could be the activity report, an activity report because of a certain type of grant that happened in a specific date, that also had, scroll down to something that's a select, that met a specific core objective. And so it can become really granular for the kinds of information, the way that then they group those grantees or the main contacts or whoever that is in order to take action, whether that's a bulk email to all of those people, letting them know about a change in reporting requirements or letting them know about an additional grant opportunity that is relevant to previous projects that they were part of. Or it could even be about those that were rejected, that funding was turned down, but maybe you want to let them know about a new opportunity that could still fit their needs. And then this is a different view in CiviCRM about more reporting. So the other was searching, and this is the kind of one of the standard views for the different kinds of reports that can be set up. So we can see this is an activities detail report where I can select the specific columns that I want for this report. We saw the common report fields when we were looking at the kind of the anatomy of that web form. And this allows me to then create save reports, have them up to date, have them sent to myself or maybe to my boss on a regular basis to show these are the new applications that came in and these are the high level information about those that you need to stay aware of. And so there's a lot that can be done then from a reporting standpoint too. And so I said on the slide, strategic site building, because while there is one Drupal custom module that was developed that has all the little things that were not available just through site building, and there's one CiviCRM extension that was developed, there's so much that was leveraged for what kind of put this system together. That is a lot of web forms and a lot of views and a lot of contextual filters to display this information and not other information that requires a deep understanding about what's possible, to deeply understand the software, but also to ask the right questions related to what do you need to do with your data? How are we going to structure the data? What does the user need to see? So thinking about that user journey and experience. So when someone logs in as a grantee, they can see information about their report and they can have an easy experience to choose one of two options, and that those options are even available based on the type of grant that it is. So if it's a different type of grant, there is an additional report that they need to fill out that then becomes another button on their screen that they can press. And so this provides for a unified experience for the grantees, and it's the same system that then the grant managers are also logging in and updating and managing those grants and sending communications. So that's the overview of grant management. Returning to slides. the next is how the system was set up to manage events, which is the same line of strategic site building, that there's not a ton of customizations within what the system, how it was set up, but leveraging that same list of modules that we went through earlier. And so related to event management, I'll be demonstrating how NNLM staff members can set up a training session, how they add that to the system, what the experience is for those who are wanting to register for a training or access the training resources after they've registered, what it looks like for reporting on training participants, and also submitting reports, and kind of tying together what we saw a little bit with the activity reports related to funded grants and how that ties to event participation. Because it's critical that for NNLM and many organizations, in order to measure your impact, you have to collect data in a specific way, in a certain structure, and have that fit together of whether or not the event is within this system or was hosted at the public library, that people signed up on a piece of paper when they walked into the room. There needs to be a way to, and hopefully an easier way that doesn't drive everybody crazy, to collect the information from those different sources. So I'll go back to sharing a different tab with a whole bunch of stuff about events, which is this one. Okay, let's make this big. Guess I can just click this button. Okay, so we're still on the nnlm.gov website. This time, we are looking at upcoming training opportunities. So trainings that are available now. And we see that there's no scheduled classes or regional, because this is a staging instance. So right now, this site is only showing what those on-demand classes are. And all of these events are actually CiviCRM events, and I'll show you what that means and what that looks like. But you see the title, we could click in, view more, the dates, it's on demand, and so when it can be accessed through, in a summary of what that is, and a variety of filters. The detail view of that, we see just more information about it, class details, all these custom fields that relate, that this is NNLM's data structure. Another organization that is setting up events may or may not need those same fields. That's the power of being able to create things relevant only to a specific type of organization, and who the main class contacts are. And then if I click to register now, it's going to ask me for some basic information. Again, it's auto-populating my information because I'm logged in and it knows who I am. And so all I have to do is select my professional role. If we look into CiviCRM of what that is, this is that event view of configuring event, and this is the event that we were just looking at, where they can specify, we'll go to the info and settings tab, what type it is, if it's related to a campaign, which isn't relevant, what role should a new registrant have when they register for the event, and then all of those details that you saw about the event, as well as the custom fields that NNLM needed related to their event management needs or structure. So thinking about how many continuing education credits do you get? What's the category? Is there an experience level required? And then right here, this is an important section, the class access and recording. And so because some of these are just something like on demand for what this site is showing, when you register, then you need to have access to that. And so what we set up was that when someone is adding the details for this in the system, that those details automatically live with the event. So once you become registered for that event, then those details can display for you in the system. And we'll see what that looks like on the profile page, which again relates to permissions and pulling that through when building a Drupal view and displaying CiviCRM data. So this is my contact record in CiviCRM. We can see that the event, I registered myself for that. So then when I look at my user profile in the system, so this is me being a logged in user on the site, I can see my upcoming trainings. And then I can click into that when I log into the system, and I can see how long I have access for it. And if I want, I can view all courses, which leads me back to that, the view of upcoming opportunities. Then, since I'm registered for this class, when I view the page, I have this new block of class access that would not display to somebody else who's logged in but has not registered for this event. And it's a simple thing, but it's a powerful thing to put it all in one place. The way that this is tied together when we think about what we talked earlier about of grant management, then there's a lot of participant data that is collected when funding is made available. And so if I do a quick scroll, get to the top of the screen, this is that subaward activity report that we saw before. That is how, when someone is looking at their overview page of the award, then how they submit information to the funder. At the end of it, then there's also the ability to say, was participant data collected, and then how. So you can either upload a participant spreadsheet. There is some customizations here in order to have that then fit with the additional participant data that already existed in the system, or we can add rows and just manually enter that line by line, depending on the format that was collected in. You can see that I could say that there was 5 people from 81101 who were all educators, and there was 2 people from a zip code. And the way that then this fits with this registration, because I'm entering in my professional role and it knows my zip code, because as an authenticated user, that's a required field on user registration. So I don't have to collect that again. I can just always update that in my profile if needed. The same thing is true for submitting a staff activity report. So this is an activity report, again, a web form that NNLM staff would submit. If I do a blur scroll to the end, then there's also participant data that's collected. So what are staff doing out in the field related to promoting the work of NNLM? Maybe it was an event that was managed on this website. If it was, then I will select from all of those events. And this is a list of all of the CiviCRM events in the system. Or maybe it wasn't an event and have participant data that was about an event managed from the system. It was not managed. And then we have that same process that you saw in the other grant reporting form, to either have it manually entered kind of row by row, participant count, add more rows, or I can upload a spreadsheet. They need to be able to put those 2 different types of data together, right? So we have registration data from the actual event that's happening in the system, and we also have this manual data that's being typed in by someone with zip code. And so those are these 2 views where, to keep things really simple for admins, they can come in for event participant data, either enter the ID of what that event is, or title. You see these aren't required, the date range that happened. And so I want to look at the first quarter of this year of any participants who were of this particular role, so then I can show the kind of impact or reach we had within certain sectors. And the same thing is true if that data was just imported in as a CSV, so that this is not actually registration data, but was upload data related to a grant report. And so being able to see the 2 together allows the ability to see a full picture of reach, even though some of that was actual event registrations and other was just reported after the fact. And go back and see if I have anything else to say. So that's about events. And so that's what I had to say. I gotta remember my next slide. And yeah, so that's how Drupal and CiviCRM were leveraged for NNLM. Lots of web forms, lots of permissions, lots of thinking about roles. If anyone has any questions, that's to LinkedIn to connect, or my email address. And now we have some time for questions.
How customizable is the front end with the CRM?
The front end as far as the display? There are some extensions that make on the CRM side display differently. What the CRM is really, the CiviCRM is really only used by the team members. And so as a website visitor, you would never be seeing CiviCRM. And so that's the power of Drupal, to be able to take contact data, show it to the world, and have that look however you want it to look, because you're basically doing site building as if it's content data, as if it's Drupal, because the CiviCRM entity module makes all of that contact data like a true Drupal entity. So
how about at the end, when there was add more rows or read in from CSV, So was any of that custom?
Yeah, so that last part was definitely custom in order to have an import. And we actually have all of that data for the participant data that is not an event registration. The participant data is Drupal content. And so I think it's even something like the content type is called participant or something. And we tried it as civic contacts, and then we realized that was an awful idea because it was creating all these no name contacts with the zip code and role. It was like, this is just going to become a clutter even in a month. And so it made a lot more sense for that to be Drupal data, but with the same data structure of what they require and collect for event registrations, and the fact that that is standardized across all these hundreds of events that are managed all across the country, there can still be a match in order to have reporting to see the bigger picture of whether the event was managed through the system or not. We can still see the outcome of who participated and where were they from. Yeah.
About file sharing, things like that across users.
As far as having files that are uploaded, there's not a lot. I'm trying to think how much that is uploaded as part of the reporting. I think it's really that there's a lot of fields, but not a lot of reports that have to be uploaded into the system. By having that information filled in individual fields, then that allows them to report on that better instead of trying to interpret from somebody's multi-page report that they're submitting via an upload field.
Gotcha. I have another client that we ended up using FireLogic for just about everything we've discussed, except for, events, being able to have a community, information, collect information, etc. The biggest thing, though, with them was that kind of like being able to collaborate in one space and file sharing doesn't seem like it quite does that, but that doesn't mean that it would be the right fit for them, but this would be the right fit for a lot of other people. So is there really an ideal size client or an ideal client for this?
No, I mean, I can't think of specific limitations that would say. I think one thing about Drupal and CiviCRM together is that, like I said about Drupal, it's a pile of Legos. CiviCRM is too, and so it's a very different model of building. There's a lot of other products that this is the set of features that you get, and be happy with that. And I think that developing systems like this, it's kind of all on the table, like, okay, how do we want our data structure? And so that the business analysis piece is so critical, having people ask the right questions. As an agency, we work with a lot of organizations that will kind of inherit the system that was built for them. And when we look at the data structure that was implemented 12 years ago, maybe that doesn't make sense for where the organization is now. And so I think there's pros and cons to the different kinds of platforms and what makes the most sense. And that's, again, a business analysis question to even think about what the software tool is, why that's chosen, and especially for NNL, who is maintaining it? What's the skill set required to keep this up to date? Because investing in a system like this, that there was a lot of people building web forms and people, like, there's a lot of building that's happening that's very different than just kind of turning on a feature and now you're accepting grant applications. So more work up front, but also the flexibility that gives to make changes or to add to is really powerful. And the documentation is really important too for any kind of system, but for systems like this. So even if on the building side, we know how things fit together, we want to minimize the number of options that somebody has when they log into the system of what they see they can do, and having training resources about the system available where onboarding happens. And so even for us, making sure that we understand our clients, what their onboarding process is for new staff or volunteers that may come in, and to have the training resources about the system available in that same space. So it's open source. We don't own this platform. It's not Square's system. It's an NLM system, and it will have a longer runway when everybody can best connect with how the system can be best utilized. Yeah.
I'm just curious how many people will be using it.
Yeah, so
users, but people who are entering data.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know the number of contacts that actually exist per region. The system has been live for maybe even a year and a half at this point. We launched some additional features into it within the last several months, but it's already It's already been live for a long time. I haven't done a contact count. I didn't look in production to see what the use is. But I think that's the power of permissions with Drupal, to kind of hone in on what someone should be able to see and do. And they don't know that their role is any different, and they shouldn't. No one should have to be aware of any of that when they're logging into any sort of system. Great. Okay. Well, thanks for coming.